go ahead again, man.
Okay. Little boys and little girls, dirty feet and pretty curls, some with smiles, some with pain. They walked along the wagon train. The wind would blow about their heads. The dirt and grass would be their beds. Often sick and clothed in rags, still they loved their moms and dads. Men with oxen, mules, and flies. Women cooked and baked the pies. Daddy, who is leading Brigham Young? Why, Jesus Christ, of course, my son. A morning sun, a moonlit night, a just reward for doing right. Some only see what's in their hand. Others see what's in God's plan. To some, it's getting us the meals. The next guy, it's getting us the hay. And the next guy is doing his report for the newspaper. You know, everybody plays a part.
Okay, Russ, why don't you do it again, please?
Little boys and little girls, dirty feet and pretty curls, some with smiles, some with pain. They walked along the wagon train. The wind would blow about their heads. The dirt and grass would be their beds. Often sick and clothed in rags, still they loved their moms and dads. Men with oxen, mules, and flies. Women cooked and baked the pies. Daddy, who is leading Brigham Young? Why, Jesus Christ, of course, my son. A morning sun, a moonlit night, a just reward for doing right. Some only see what's in their hand. Others see what's in God's plan.
Okay. We can get some birds to answer at the end of that one. That was pretty.
Okay, please.
Tell us about the South train coming up, the Oxbow.
The South Mormon Trail, the Oxbow route. We left Council Bluffs amidst 5,000 school children that had come out to see the wagon train over a 3-day period. 5,000 children running through the wagon train, looking at the horses, the wagons, the mules. Just a very heartwarming experience as they scream and yell and run from one station to the next, watching Ron Rookstool, our farrier, work on a horse's shoe and tap it in, and having the kids ask questions and amazed by how far we had to go and the size of the draft horses. But there's that sense of urgency that you know that in spite of the fact you have all this commotion, one day you have to get down the trail, one step at a time. And that's when we left Council Bluffs and inched our way toward Pacific Junction. A 15-mile day, not enough to hurt any of the animals, but enough to challenge them. A nice warm day. Everybody was excited. Everybody was full of anticipation. Some knew they wouldn't be able to go all the way to Salt Lake, but they were excited to be going along with those that were.
Now you lost a horse along the way, is that right?
Between Murdoch and Ashland, a personal friend of mine, Dave Bowie, had a horse die of a heart attack. I'd watched this horse that morning in a wonderful little quick prance step move down an open field, and almost wished that my horse had the same gait. Watched that horse win a team penning contest with Dave just last summer over at David City, and the horse went down and the wagon train is filing by, and kids are looking out of the wagons at this horse that's down, and they're not used to seeing a horse down like that in saddle. And we told the kids at first that this horse is very, very tired and needs to rest. But it was in a matter of minutes that we knew it had died of a heart attack, because it had never had another illness. A bunch of the cowboys stood there, and some of the guys going by, they knew what was happening. Old Steve Boomer out of Glenwood, he knew what was happening, and He had tears in his eyes as he was going by, not much you can say. But the horse died, and one of the cowboys held its head right there in his hands, and that will be the basis of a painting for that particular day. Gene Ronka out of Ashland, Nebraska will do a painting that simply shows a horse in a cowboy's hand, and it simply says, "My friend is dead." So it was a meaningful experience to us, and you hate to see an animal die, but how symbolic on the trail, on the way to Ashland. And but within 20 minutes from the time the horse died, we had another horse saddled, and we were on the trail again. We had to, just like the pioneers had to do it. We took off and went.
What about the anticipation of meeting up with the North team?
Well, you know the wagon train's moving along, and you always anticipate that you're going to have a problem that may prevent you from arriving as planned. You know, they're experiencing approximately the same weather, maybe a little different terrain. We know we have friends on the north side that we haven't seen since we came across Iowa. People ask me, well, why don't you get in your truck and drive over to the north side and meet them? And I said, no. There's too few surprises in life. I'll just wait until we get to Kearney, and we'll see them there then. And it made it very, very special that we hadn't seen some of them since last summer on the trail across Iowa, and that was the first time I got to see him. Was on horseback riding up to the wagon train.
Was it difficult changing hands then, going from two groups into one group? Was the mixing there a challenge?
Well, you know something? We got there 3 hours in advance of the other wagon train. Gave us a chance to get lunch, anticipate the merging of the two wagon trains. But you know, it went very smoothly. We had accomplished our task, and that was to put together the southern route, to have our dedications, to have a meaningful experience for every walker, handcart, individual, the saddle horses, the teams. They were glad to get there, as it was a goal achieved, and now we have followed up with the long-term goal of getting all the way to Salt Lake. And they all enjoyed meeting together at camp, and it's new faces, and of course there's some apprehension, where am I going to go, and it's a bigger crowd and a bigger group, and logistically it's a little bigger challenge, but it's just gone real smooth, and everybody's very harmonious at this point.
Now when you see you in the saddle, you look like the stereotypical hardened cowboy, and then you write poetry like this that all of a sudden reveals quite a sensitive, different side of you.
Well, it would be fair to say that that's the first poem I ever was inclined to write. I wrote it in my pickup truck driving down Interstate 80 on the way to a meeting in Cheyenne last October 21st. Why, I have no idea. I would think of something to write, and I'd pull over on the side of the road and write a little bit and then drive on, and then all of a sudden I'd have an inclination to write something else, and somewhere between Omaha and Cheyenne, that was the poem that was written. And if it hadn't been for the fact that I had written it down on the side of the road, I don't think I'd ever remembered it, but there it was on the dash in the morning. And I don't know if I'll write another poem or ever get the inspiration from the heart to do it again, but it just seemed like the essence of what it would have been like to go down the trail back in 1846 and 1847.
So what does the trail teach you individually?
Teaches you about people, teaches you about nature, working with animals, that there's always an effort in our society today, in our culture, to try to blend the three, but on a wagon train it just happens instinctively. You get up in the morning, you realize you have to pull out at 7 o'clock. If somebody's having a problem, you've got to help out. The animals react differently based on the weather. If it's a cool morning, they may be more anxious to go. You know, we try to respect the land and leave it in as good a condition as it was when we showed up. We realize we're going to leave a few hoof prints, but that'll be nostalgia for a lot of people. And hopefully the lessons that we learn on a daily basis, some we didn't anticipate, some we look forward to, will give us a great book of memories by the time we get out to Salt Lake.
So do you think in retrospect it's a trail of tears or a trail of dreams?
It's a time of decision for a lot of people, each day they have to make a commitment. Are they going to go another day, another week? Are they going to try to go all the way to Salt Lake? Modern conveniences take a lot of the pressure off people, but it's the knowledge of those modern conveniences that put pressure on them. They know about home, and they know about the microwave oven and that meal and a nice warm place to go lay down and familiar surroundings. And it's not like that out here. Even though you see all those modern rigs, it's still getting up at 4:30 in the morning and finding a place to camp, and where's the water, and is there going to be hay, is there going to be grass, how far am I from the facilities that are going to be available. You know, there's a lot of things that keep you unraveled every day, and every day you get up it's a new spot, and so you keep hoping that tomorrow will get adjusted and get into a routine. So that's the challenge that's faced today.
What would it take to turn you back around then and not finish the trip?
Death.
Committed to go all the way.
Absolutely, every step of the way. After coming 100 miles in 3 days and then another 25 to meet up with the wagon train, my horse developed a little tenderness, and I could tell it was a little bit of a challenge for him to ride with me. So I stepped off of him and went with the walkers for about 4 miles one afternoon. But I've got one horse, that's it, to go to Utah with. He went every step of the way from Nauvoo to this point right here. Hopefully he'll make it all the way in. I can't carry him, I wish I could. I wish I could put him on my back and take him down the trail a little bit.
So you've been back with the walkers then, getting a feel for what they need. You want to sit and go?
Yeah, that'd be a lot easier on the dog.
You've been with the walkers and had a taste of what they go through for, you say, 4 or 5 miles or so. And now we see you riding back with the walkers with your horse. Is there any particular reason for that, a connection there?
Well, they do the hardest job. The man or woman that's pulling that hand cart, they have to walk, plus they have to pull. And sometimes they're in front of the bar, sometimes they're behind the bar. They turn their hands in different, always trying to find a comfortable spot, and there isn't any. And the longer you pull it and the warmer it gets and the garments start coming off, and you just watch. And all of a sudden you can tell by just a degree or two, and you watch all of the walkers and you can see the coats starting to get unbuttoned, and pretty soon they're loading into the hand carts. You get a feel of the wagon train. You get a feel of the commitment, and you hear them singing songs, and they're laughing, and the little ones are still in the hand cart sound asleep, or maybe a little bit fussy because it's still early in the morning for them. But you have a real connection with what it might have been like to be going down the trail back in the 1840s and marching your way across the land, because the huffing and the puffing and the feet, and you see some people's gait changes as their feet are sore, they're hurting, but they keep going. And somebody's in front of the hand cart pulling, there's somebody else behind pushing. And they develop a sense of bonding that I don't think the teams and the saddle horses ever develop. I mean, they're out there, they're a group, they help each other. They know they're going to stop, they're going to share water, they're going to encourage each other. And so they're always glad that I'm with them, but it's an honor for me to ride by them.
You didn't have any walkers in the South group, did you?
Oh, we had a lot of walkers on the South group. We had a lot of hand carts. Sarah Robinson, who is out here, was on the South group. She was probably our best walker, at least the most committed. But we had a number of missionaries that walked 30 miles from Timberlake to Giltner on their P-Day. They just took off and went the whole way. Sometimes they had their hand on the wagon to help pull them along a little bit, but if they got too far behind, we swept them up with a vehicle, and I told them, I want you to enjoy this. You know, don't make it so miserable. We don't want you to get so far behind, but we want you to come into camp with the rest of the wagon train with what I perceived was dignity, so you can realize that you're not left stranded out there in the dark while everybody else comes in, and you come straggling in and somebody says, well, who are these guys? You are the wagon train. Everyone in essence is in the same team, and we wanted them to come in with the pride that they knew they'd accomplished today's work.
Very good. Anything else, Mike?
I'm interested to know if if there's been a change in atmosphere among those who were in the South Party after they've joined with the North group.
On the South side, we felt an obligation to bring the history that was discovered on the South side to the members of the North side. The historic and meaningful message of the number of Mormons who crossed the Missouri River at Bethlehem, the thousands who used the South Mormon Trail and crossed at Salt Creek, and the history of the Belknap family, and the story of the toolbox, which became a casket. Now, the Belknap family has 9,000 members, and many of them were in Ashland to have the dedication, and for the first time a monument was erected on behalf of the little baby that died on the banks of the Salt Creek June 22nd of 1850, John McBride Belknap. And as they unveiled that marker, we realized that we were accomplishing and making a trail not only for our participants but for future generations that would be in a motorhome or just their automobile and stop there and look at that marker. And it happened while we were doing the trail. And to stop at the cemetery up at Bellwood, the Pleasant View Cemetery, and look out at the hundreds of people that were there to pay homage to Mormons or Civil War veterans who had been buried on the hilltop that overlooked the Platte River Valley. And you can see Schuyler in one eye and look over a little bit and see Columbus on the left and realize this is where these saints traveled many, many years before. And if you can eliminate a few modern things, you could see the past if you just looked out. And then to stop at the Deep Well Ranch down by Giltner and realize that right there, and this old gentleman took us back to where the ranch was and realized, well, this is where Brigham Young Jr. and 83 wagons and 498 mules crossed the prairie in the 1860s. It just gave everybody a special feeling in their heart to know they're standing on the same ground and hadn't changed much. Just dirt, a few trees, and some cornfields surrounding them. And it was really nice to be on a trail that hadn't been, well, civilized.
Have you told the story of the toolbox and the boy to either Kevin or anyone in our group?
I don't think so.
Can you share that with us?
Well, from what I remember, Gilbert Belknap had been a bodyguard for both Joseph Smith and Brigham Young, and when they decided who would go west in 1847, he was not selected. So Gilbert went to Fremont County, Iowa, and went into the wagon making business. And in 1850 was called to head west to Utah, and so they gathered in then Canesville and then went the South Mormon Trail down to what is now Pacific Junction, crossed over at Plattsmouth. And then on the banks of the Salt Creek, they knew their baby was sick on the 21st of June, but on June 22nd, their little 13-month-old baby, John McBride Belknap, passed away. And Brent Belknap of the Belknap Family Organization said that the diaries show that the mother was comforted by virtue of the fact that she could wrap her little baby in a blanket and put it in the toolbox that had been in the wagon, and then bury that toolbox on the banks of the Salt Creek on the east side. And they had a pretty good account of exactly where that took place. That's where the marker is today. To me, that's the essence of the entire Mormon Trail. It's a family going west to Utah, having to deal with the death of a loved one, bury the baby, and have to move on. They were part of the Warren Foot Company, which is kind of interesting because 2 days before we were to leave Council Bluffs, my folks had come over to have lunch with us before we headed south, and we had 5,000 school children visiting the campgrounds. One of the little missionaries had the name F-O-O-T-E on her little badge, and I looked up kind of teasingly and said, "Are you in relation to Warren Foot?" She said, "Yes, that's my great-great-great-grandfather." And I thought, how symbolic. He was the wagon master of the South Mormon Trail in 1850. 2 days before I get to leave, I get to meet his great-great-great-granddaughter. When President Hinckley came to dedicate the visitor center, and we had dinner the night before, President Butler came up to me and I said, I have a request because you have a missionary that needs to be released to come to Ashland to be part of the ceremony. President Butler said, not only will I release her, but I will go to her house and pick her up and bring her, because she did not know anything about the Belknap family. She just knew her great-great-great-grandfather was commander and leader of this group. So when we were standing in Ashland and they were ready to dedicate that marker, I turned around and looked to my right and I could see Becky over there. And I called her up so she could stand beside me, and they gave me the honor of reading the inscription on that marker, the first time it was ever read. And I thought, here's where the descendants of two great families come together at a spot 147 years after their family traveled this very, very spot on this river. And now we finally can put this baby to rest. And that's what that meant to me, to go across there. And we had a dedication at the historic St. Stephen's Church in Ashland, Nebraska. When we concluded services at the St. Stephen's Church, our lead wagon, which is being driven by Ray and Pat Haley out of New Virginia, Iowa, we had the toolbox, and that was it in the wagon. No riders, no participants. And it just so happened that there were some Boy Scouts that were there, and I went over their leader and I said, how many are there? And he said 7. I said, that'll work fine. We put 3 on each side and 1 in the back. And they were symbolic pallbearers as they moved down Silver Street in Ashland toward the final resting place. However, the Belknap family has asked us to continue carrying that toolbox all the way to Salt Lake. So even though we met up with the other wagon train, we still have another job to do, and that's to get that toolbox to Salt Lake City, Utah. And in that toolbox there are a number of special items. There's a pair of little booties to remember the baby by, and a blanket, some period items, an old newspaper from 1830, same year that the church was founded. So when somebody in Gothenberg, Nebraska, or at Chimney Rock looks into that toolbox, they're seeing something in there that would have been in there 147 years ago. We get to Salt Lake, it's up to the Belknap family to decide what they want to do with it, where they want to put it. Our job is to get it to Salt Lake and tell the story. And so hopefully we can tell as many people in the United States of America what happened 147 years ago, and it has a lot of meaning today.
One last thing I have is, what makes this reenactment, this wagon train, different from anything else you've ever, any other wagon train you've been on?
Because I don't think it's a reenactment. I think it's a wagon train in 1997 going down the road. We use the word reenactment. I've been in reenactments. That's where you set up on Friday and on Sunday night you pull out. You get up at 4:30 every morning and go down the road, and the wind's blowing 40 or 50 miles an hour and the dirt's blowing in your face and the wind's so cold that you're just sitting in the saddle shivering and the people are in their wagons shivering. That's not a reenactment. That's a real wagon train. When your horse dies on the trail, that's not a reenactment. That's a real pain for a man that's been riding that horse and loves his animal. And you see people that ride with you for a week or a month, and then they have to go home. Finances don't permit it. So they leave, and you lose a friend. We lost a good friend when he had to go back home because his heart just wasn't capable of holding up under the pressure, and he checked into a hospital, and the doctor said getting up at 4:30 and putting up with the cold and the wind is just too much. This man needs to go home and rest. So he did. He plans to meet up with us out in Utah again at the end of the trail. But they'll use the word reenactment, but until you walk 25 miles behind a wagon train, or you sit in the saddle for 8 or 9 hours and there's nowhere to get off and you have to go if you're committed, it becomes very, very real. And so other wagon trains just don't have the essence. They're fun. You know, you can go down the trail and you can have a good time, but this combines the history of the church, past and present, because 50 years from now, they'll look back and, what did they do in 1997? How did they get to Salt Lake? Who knows what mode of transportation we'll be using then? Will the internal combustion engine even be used? somebody might try to do a reenactment by using internal combustion engines, and maybe gasoline will be obsolete, it'll be forbidden. And how did they go? They only went 10, 12 miles a day. And so this then will be tomorrow's wagon train, try to reenact what we're doing now. And there's a certain spirit, I don't know how to exactly say it, for me personally, to pull into camp and you see people huddle around the wagons and the horses and the mules, and it's going too quick. Everybody thinks it's going to take till July 22nd, and and that'll just be here before you know it, and then everybody will have that feeling of accomplishment. But I tell people, don't wait to Salt Lake to start celebrating. Celebrate right now. Celebrate today. You got down the trail, you met new people, you rode on a bus with somebody to go to dinner in town, or you saw a special event, or maybe you just saw those turkeys as we were coming across a field, or you saw the deer run across the field. You just got to take each moment and try to seize the moment and realize that it isn't going to just be one thing at the end of the trail. As a matter of fact, the end of the trail might be disappointing to some people when there's just thousands and thousands of people there to greet you. It'll take away a little of the essence of what it's about. And some of the most enjoyable days is when there's nobody there, and like now you can hear those birds chirping in the back and singing their songs, and if you can hear that, you're still on the trail. When you can't, you may not be.
Wonderful.